Thanks for being. Thank you all for coming. Super excited for this week of sessions. We already have almost 150 people on this call, and we're excited to have you all here tonight on this Monday, starting your week off strong. We're gonna drop some links in the chat. Erica's been dropping them in. Make sure you sign up for Leland. Make sure you join the Slack because we're going to be doing a lot of like Q&A there. And that way you can access the answers to your questions later as well. So make sure you join that Slack community. Also, this is the first of 13 sessions that we're having this week. So you can see today, this session will be about breaking into investment banking. In an hour, we're going to have a session about breaking into private equity. And then 2 hours, we'll have a Women in Finance and Diversity Programs panel. Then throughout the week, we're going to be diving deeper into a lot of the different types of roles, going through technical interviews for banking, technical interviews for private equity. We're also going to be doing some behavioral interview stuff and deep dives into things like corporate finance, FP&A, public markets, wealth and asset management, and even private equity or even venture capital. So make sure you go and join each of these sessions individually, because if you don't join the sessions individually, you won't get the specific Zoom links to those sessions, and you won't get the recordings. It does take us a second to process the recordings, so definitely encourage you to join live and to join live because we'll do a bunch of like free giveaways on these sessions for coaching and other things. So make sure you do that. Very excited to have all of you here. We have an amazing panel here tonight. Also, as just a way to kick things off, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. I posted about this Finance Week on LinkedIn. We're going to do a little experiment. If you like and comment on this LinkedIn post, I'm going to pick one random person and give them $100 free coaching. So I'm dropping it in the chat. Make sure you do that. And yeah, like and comment on that LinkedIn post. We will do that tonight at midnight. Pick someone to give you $100 free coaching. Many of you are already working with coaches. You can use this towards future coaching sessions. So, all right, excited to have you here. We're going to jump in. All right, so tonight is this session is breaking into investment banking. It is our first session of Finance Week. We do have those other sessions, so make sure that if you're not interested in investment banking, go sign up for all the sessions that you are interested in. We're going to cover a lot this week. A lot of tactical stuff. This session will probably start a little bit higher level, and then we'll drill into as much tactical stuff as we can possibly get. We're also going to send you a bunch of free resources like investment banking interview questions guide, and other free resources for breaking into private equity, venture capital. And we're also going to do a bunch of free coaching drops. So make sure you do that. In terms of logistics, join the Slack community. Make sure you ask questions in the finance channel. Seeing many of you getting into that channel right now, but if you haven't joined yet, make sure you do that. Also, make sure to RSVP for the sessions that you're interested in, so you get all those links, and make sure to sign up for Leland as well, so you stay in the loop and get access to future events like this and the recordings. All right, is that enough logistics for the day? Let's jump into introductions here. So I'm John Colliker. I'm the CEO of Leland. I did not do investment banking, unfortunately. I did do some venture capital and private equity internships, but I'm going to lean on these amazing panelists who are in the thick of it. So thanks for drawing on the screen, someone. We will disable that. Let's see. No more annotations, please, if you don't mind. Okay, clear all drawings. Thank you. Always fun to have that one person just experiment with that. Okay, and then you'll see Erica on the chat and on the call, Amelia and Josh who are helping out. Big thank you to Erica. She's the one that coordinates all of these events. It's a ton of work. It's all free. It's all to help you in your investment banking and private equity and other journeys. So big thank you to her for all the hard work that goes into this. And I'm going to kick it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. We have an all-star lineup tonight and throughout this week, and I'm super excited to learn from them. So Jacob, we'll kick it over to you for your introduction, then we'll go to David and then Kate.
Yep. Happy to give a brief intro. I'm Jacob Bryson. I'm from a small town in Orange County called San Clemente. I went to BYU, did a number of different finance internships in college, but did my junior internship in investment banking with Qatalyst Partners. If you're not familiar, Qatalyst Partners does technology M&A. So they're one of the big tech M&A shops in San Francisco for technology only. So I did that, and then I returned full-time after I graduated college in 2019. So I did 2 years there. And now I work for a long-only public equity investment firm that's also based in San Francisco. I work with $1 billion fund investing in the public markets. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is David Vasquez. From Brooklyn, New York originally, went to Columbia for undergrad, studied economics, and knew nothing about banking at the time, but found myself doing 2 years of investment banking at Bank of America in the leverage finance team. So for those who don't know, it's debt capital for riskier companies and for a lot of M&A transactions. After that, I did 2 years of private equity at a firm called Ares. And since then, I've done a whole bunch of other things, venture capital, some social sector work, and I got my MBA from Stanford a few years ago.
It's great. Kate, bring us home.
Hi guys, I'm Kate. I am a current student actually, so closer to you guys in the timeline, at BYU studying accounting. I just finished my summer at Lazard, and prior to that, I had prior experience in finance, one of which was doing PE at Partners Group. I'll be headed back to Lazard at their New York office full-time upon graduation next April, and then hopefully we'll continue to work in their M&A and restructuring division.
It's great. So we have a bunch of different perspectives here, and really grateful for you guys taking time out of your Monday evenings to join us. So thanks for being here. We will spend most of the time hearing from their expertise. We also really want to get to know you. So Eric is going to drop this in the Slack. Where are you attending school or working, dialing in from? And then what are you hoping to learn this week during Finance Week? That helps us kind of tailor some of the sessions and some of our answers. Drop in the thread, if you don't mind, in Slack. Looks like a lot of you have joined. If you haven't joined the Slack yet, make sure you do that. Eric has dropped the links in the chat. Who's going to be our first one, huh? I'm hoping that I can learn how to break into all of these career paths for a future life of mine that I will not be. I think when I was an undergrad, investment banking, private equity, venture capital were all the hot things. Oh, if you don't mind dropping it in the thread, that'd be great, instead of the right below it. Okay, we got Atlanta, Manhattan, Florida State. We got all over the place. This is great. Germany, Berkeley. You guys need to learn how to use Slack threads, but we'll forgive you. All right. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. This is great. Make sure you drop in what you're looking to learn to prepare for, looks like a lot of networking, how to break in, technicals. Cool. All right, this is great. It's always nice to hear from you. Make sure you drop your questions. You can drop your questions directly in Slack. It's always nice to hear from your specific questions, and many of you will likely have the same questions. So just to do a quick overview of what Leland is, we are a platform that brings together some of the most qualified and frankly, incredible coaches that have experience in all of these career paths and at these top schools to help people exactly like you reach their goals. We've helped thousands, tens of thousands of people break into all of the most competitive investment banks and other career paths and graduate programs. And we do that through these amazing coaches. Whoa, what's going on? All right, let's reshare here. So you'll see, oh, geez, why is this reshare here? All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay, let's go. So you'll see on Leland's platform, people that have attended all of the best schools and all these different companies. We do that through one-on-one coaching, which many of you have commented on my LinkedIn post already. We'll do that, the free $100 raffle. We also have group classes on a number of different topics, and we have content. So that's free events like this, We also have guides and other articles to help you reach your goals. We also have a new product called Leland Plus. We're actually building out the investment banking track right now, so we'll keep you posted as that goes live. But we try to bring as many resources to you as possible, make it as affordable as possible, and make it as accessible so that you can reach your goals. Just a more tactical example of what this looks like. Max, who's a student at Northwestern, wanted to break into investment banking. He started to work with a coach named Sandra from Chicago. She understood the Chicago recruiting landscape. Also went to HBS, so super talented. They did everything from LinkedIn, resume review, networking tips, built out a company list, technical interview prep, behavioral interview prep. So sort of worked together end to end. And then he landed a job or an internship and got into JP Morgan Chicago, which is super competitive, obviously. And it was sort of a success story that we just heard about in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully this is all of you. We'd love to help you. And we have some amazing coaches that are here to help. All right. With that, we're gonna shift gears over to our panel for tonight. Let's just kind of start it off more general. And maybe we'll start with you, David. What is, obviously this is super broad, and we'll go into some of the specifics, but what's your best tip for people thinking about breaking into investment banking?
Yeah, I think like the overarching tip that I would give you is extreme preparation. I think if you are not used to seeking out these type of roles, you may think of it more like taking a class, like that much effort into getting prepared, and even things beyond that. And we'll talk about, I'm sure, some networking and so forth. But you really need to focus on preparation, and it's hard to do that alone. So whether that's with friends, whether that's with a Leland coach, it's really important to come prepared, take the necessary time. It is a multi-year process, so preparation is key.
That's great. Jacob, we'll go to you and then to Cate.
Yeah, I think that David, I want to riff off David's a little. I know a lot of really smart people that I think many people that want to pursue a career in investment banking think that they're very smart and want to be successful, and I think that's great. But one attribute I think of pretty smart people up until this point in their life is they've been able to procrastinate things. Just cram the night before the test, you'll get an A- and you can move on with your life. I have yet to meet anyone who has been really successful in the recruiting process, and I've talked to many people who have been able to do that, been successful with procrastination in this attribute. There's just too much data to synthesize, and these questions and these interviews are all open-ended and have a lot of finer points, and it takes, as David said, a lot of preparation. So I would recommend not procrastinating. This timeline is probably double what you think it is, so be maybe 3 or 4 times as generous as you might think. And then the only other thing I'd maybe add is just talk to a lot of people who are in the space and have already done the path. I think that it'll give you a lot of reassurances about, one, how you stack up relative to them, and two, what it will take to accomplish this.
Yeah, that's great. Cate, anything you'd add?
Yeah, kind of going along with both David and Jacob, I always tell kids to full send it. That's my favorite thing to tell them. And then more than that is just to be curious. So kind of like what Jacob was talking about with the amount of prep that you need, digging one level deeper in your coffee chats, in your research, it'll enhance like why this bank, why are you doing investment banking? It'll deepen your personal relationships and your network, just all over. Being curious will make you a better candidate.
Yeah, I like that. Let's get full send it tattooed on all of our shoulders for all of our arms for tonight. That's a great, I mean, it really is. I remember joining the investment banking club as a sophomore and going on a trip and just hearing about the intense networking that needed to happen to land and even just an internship. And I ended up not going into investment banking, but I applied the exact same thing when I was recruited into tech. And it just, I think it's like a requirement for investment banking, but it's like best practice for everything else. And I think that's great advice. Thanks for kicking us off with that. So Cate, we'll start with you on this one. Walk us through your personal investment banking recruiting process.
Yeah, so I recruited as an undergrad. So in my sophomore year, I started attending investment banking club meetings. So my school had one. I'm sure lots of your guys' schools have one as well. Through there, the IB club hooked us up with a lot of alumni, and I got to know a few banks. applied to the diversity exploratory programs. Those are programs that are available to all diversity candidates, so females, underrepresented minorities who are hoping to break into the space. And then I was able to secure first round interviews with a few different banks. Lazard happened to kick off really early, and they were one of my top choices. So once I got that offer, I ended everything else and decided to go with them.
That's great. Jacob, let's go to you and then David. And I think also would be helpful to hear like other recruitment processes that you've seen outside of your own too. So I had got pinged from a couple people that were wondering, are some of these learnings applicable for career pivoters as well, or other folks trying to break in later on? So just another thing to underscore.
Yeah. My path is very similar to Kate's. We went to the same undergrad. I am a straight white male, so I didn't qualify for any diversity initiatives whatsoever, but many of the same processes. I would say I think that in terms of people pivoting from other careers, I think that takes a lot of thought and preparation, and that is the unbeaten path. And I haven't talked to many people who have been successful just at like I would say there's no clear path. And I couldn't tell you off the bat what would be a clear path besides going back and getting an MBA. I think many people go and get an MBA. But if you're out of your undergrad and you're into a career, I think it takes a lot of hard work and effort on your side. And it's definitely been done. I know Big Four accountants or people that have made the jump, but it's always very unconventional. So I would definitely say a lot of the advice we give for the interviews and everything is super applicable, but you're going to have to knock more doors and talk to more people as you try and follow that path.
Yeah. David, anything you'd add?
Yeah. So, like Kate and Jacob, I started to recruit during my sophomore year of college for different investment banking internships. The banks would come to campus, and the goal was always to leave with at least 3 business cards from every single event that I went to and follow up within 24 hours with each person that I met with some sort of personal anecdote of something we talked about. And that was kind of the game that you cycle through over and over again. And then I did my junior year internship and did that internship in what's called the capital markets groups, which is, we can always talk about. And actually pivoted to another team in the bank once I got my full-time offer. So one thing I will say that is potentially common for people who are looking to pivot is to be open to other roles within the bank that are on the investment banking side. Things like corporate banking are common, capital markets roles like equity capital markets and debt capital markets. There are opportunities, let's say, to go to a small investment banking firm, pivot to a large bulge bracket firm in a group like corporate banking or capital markets. And then I have seen laterals from there. So it's a little bit of a multi-step process, but it's something that I've seen. It's been pretty common from those that I've seen that have lateral.
Yeah, that's great. Super helpful. Kate, maybe just to go back to you for one quick thing. I think it's clear that the investment banking recruiting processes are getting earlier and earlier. When should people be thinking about like what's like a timeline they should be thinking about in their head for the recruiting process?
Yeah, so we recommend students essentially commit to going through the recruiting process at the beginning of sophomore year. Taking your freshman year to kind of think through IB and getting to know the space a little bit is kind of the best time to do that. Interviews this year, like some banks have already opened their processes and they're mostly going to kick off around January, February, and those will be for sophomores and then who will then, intern in the summer after their junior year. So the process does start early. And if you've missed it, like you're older than a sophomore, for example, we do recommend students try to push back graduation with like a double minor or getting an integrated master's degree.
Yep. Okay. That's super helpful. And I had a question come in that asked like, when do people start to work with either mentors or a coach on Leland? And we see it, as early as even high school, but definitely like freshman year, starting to think through things. Maybe your freshman year is just more checking in, making sure you're on track. And then as you kind of dive in deeper, end of freshman year, beginning of sophomore year, doing a lot more technical interview prep and other practice. So we have people working with coaches across, that entire educational journey. And then we also do see people, for the questions around pivoters, we do see people that have graduated or maybe are considering an MBA or coming out of an MBA program or are just trying to make a pivot. that we'll start to work with a coach and figure out what is that unconventional path that Jacob had mentioned. How do we, how am I going to craft this for my unique situation? Because there may not necessarily be a proven path, but there is a path that you can create for yourself. But it just takes a little bit more creativity. Okay, so let's talk through like the networking, coffee chats. And David, we'll go to you for this one because I really liked your anecdote around getting business cards and following up with unique anecdotes. I think that says a lot about kind of the personal touch. Obviously, these people are getting reached out to by a bunch of other folks. Like, who are they reaching out to? Is it the associates analyst first? Is it the, how do you recommend people building this process in their minds?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to like stress on this is these aren't coffee chats like the way you would think about having a coffee chat with a friend. These are basically interviews. So you have to come in really prepared to have these conversations and really polished. So, keep that in mind that when you are reaching out to someone, when you are meeting them in person, that you actually do have to prepare as if it is an interview. Now, for me, there were events on my campus that I was actually lucky enough to meet folks in person, ask them 3 or 4 questions about their bank, move on, meet someone else. And I think the game is if you meet people in person in that way to move pretty quickly. If you're doing LinkedIn cold outreach, try to find folks who are either younger, so analysts and associates, and ideally who have gone to your alma mater. Those are the likely folks who would actually kind of reach out, but then it becomes a numbers game. Once you kind of ideally start to talk to folks, the key is to always, 1, follow up with that person that you spoke to, and 2, ask them if there's someone else that you should be speaking to, whether that's on their team, whether that's on another team, whether that's an HR person. I think typically I've seen a lot of folks drop the ball not thinking about those follow-ups because one person should cascade to a host of people at a bank. So if you grab 5 business cards and only one person responds to you for a coffee chat, that one person should ideally open up the door to talk to at least 3 other people. So that's why it's important to be prepared and to really have a game plan going into your coffee chats.
Yeah, that's great. Kate or Jacob, anything you'd add on this one that was helpful?
I'll just add one thing. I liked these are interviews. They can be casual, people can be nice, but they're all judging you on how you perform and your crispness. That's why I think the best practices when approaching coffee chats and networking to get involved in these banks is to start at the lowest levels and work your way up. And so the lowest level is actually someone who has either gotten an internship offer or has returned from an internship. So Kate, for example, at BYU would be someone who has spent time at a bank. She won't be that judgmental. She's not directly involved in the actual interviews for this upcoming year's analysts. So she would be the first layer of people, and I would try to talk to everyone I can at that layer. And then I would slowly work my way up the hierarchy. So next would be like the first year analysts that are just about to leave college or are going there. And then I would work my way up to try to talk to actual analysts and associates, because I think those analysts that are currently there are probably some of the biggest decision makers, and they'll be some of your first round interviews. And those are the people you want to be the most crisp with. So if you can push them off to be later in your conversations, you'll hopefully be a better version of yourself.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. And Kate, maybe we'll go to you because you obviously got started early. How do you craft your story? Many of these folks are freshmen, sophomores. It's not like their entire life has culminated to this moment where investment banking was like their end all be all, but they're trying to come up with this authentic story. How did you do it? How do you recommend people do this?
So the way I actually crafted my story was by coming to a Leland IB session. I signed up for a class and then I had a wonderful coach help me through my story. So I recommend doing that. But in addition to that, I think a lot of self-reflection goes into crafting your story. And then after you figure out what's important to you and why and what has led you to wanting to be in investment banking today, which all that should go in your story, practicing it with multiple people who can all be really critical about it and basically rip it apart to help you get the best story possible that you can have. So that's what I would do.
That's great. David or Jacob, anything else you'd recommend with story building?
Yeah, I actually think that this is like a great opportunity to utilize coffee chats to understand others' stories and what got them into investment banking. I think right now where you
Mhm.
are in your process, you'll have a general sense of why investment banking. And it's likely something you can rip off a website. But as you talk to folks in coffee chats, one of the best questions to ask is what got them into investment banking and what do they enjoy about their job today? Like, and maybe how has that changed as they gone through that? You'll be able to kind of get specific and start to pull on things that are actually really relevant to yourself. So that's a great place to kind of utilize questions to kind of get better in crafting your own story.
Yeah, that's great. Um, okay, we'll go to you, Jacob, for this one. Um, how do you get experience that's relevant to investment banking before you have investment banking internship recruiting coming up? I mean, you're young, right? Like it's your freshman, sophomore year. Like what are you doing to gain that relevant experience?
Yeah, this is the classic chicken and the egg problem where you don't have any experience, but no one wants you. I would say that one thing that's very clear about investment banking is having like a 4.0 from like a very prestigious college is not enough to get you in the door. So you have to have the experience. And many of these experiences are not some like proof that you're a genius. Like if you go work at some firm, they know you're just like the pawn at the bottom of the totem pole. What they really want though is to see you stretching and like sacrificing time to show you're like committed to investment banking or finance. And so many of these opportunities as a freshman and sophomore are firms essentially doing favors. They're just trying to help out the next generation. And so I think that at BYU, for example, there was an entire section of the finance organization that had these essentially firms that were offering to take on unexperienced interns to just get their feet wet and learn how to do things. And I think that you should try and be pretty aggressive at your school. Either they'll have a formal resource for you there, or there will be faculty and professors and administrators that will have connections that you can help. And then the other part of gaining relevant work experience is shaking all the leaves in the bushes in your personal life. This is the time where you know nothing and you have no experience. So it's time to call in the family favors. And I know lots of people that don't have a ton of family favors, but they met a kid in their freshman dorm whose dad kind of works at a finance role at a local company. And they asked that friend's dad if they would let him intern there. And again, I think that the idea of, oh, you're going to go work at an investment bank is not what anyone is looking for. They're looking for like a commitment to investment banking. So be on a periphery of working. My first role was working for a small tech company's internal finance department. And I think that really helped me then say, hey, look, I've done finance on some level and I want to do more through investment banking at a tech M&A shop. So I think that's kind of how I would frame the approach.
Yeah, I like that. Anything else, David or Kate, that you'd add?
One thing I would add is that like cold emailing on like through LinkedIn can go a long way. I have several friends who got in their first internships in search funds. So if you go to a school that produces a lot of alumni that do search funds, or if you're just able to go on LinkedIn and find search funds where you can offer kind of your like free intern labor, that is one way to go about it as well if you've exhausted kind of all the options that Jacob touched over.
Yeah, that's great. Search funds are that's a hack. Find, I mean, David and I from business school know like a million people that are doing search funds out of MBA programs. I'm sure Kate and Jacob know many in their networks as well. Find people that have finance backgrounds, that have connections, offer to help them out for free. I know that not everyone's in a position to do free internships, but maybe you can, dedicate a few hours a week to trying to build those relationships. And I think it's a good point that Jacob made around not everyone, like we're not saying call up your mom or your dad who's the head of an investment bank. Most people do not have that, but figure out how can you create those relationships through any sort of goodwill or connections that you do have. And that'll show a lot of scrappiness and hard work. Okay, so I think one of the classic questions is why banking, why this bank? David, I thought you had a good suggestion to ask people in the coffee chats. And maybe that's where you start here is just like, try to tailor it. But I'm curious any advice that you have, David, we'll start with you and then open it up for these questions in particular.
Yeah, so, I think the way the kind of progression tends to go is we all start with a generic why banking. And to get to that generic why banking, you have to do research. You have to read about banking. You need to understand what investment banking is, what the lifestyle is. You'll find all this stuff online, or talk to folks that are in your schools that have done investment banking, just to get a general why banking. I'm really interested in transactions and mergers and acquisitions. Awesome. Let's start there. That's a building block. But to the point I made earlier, you're going to want to keep drilling down, and it gets much harder to do that unless you are talking to experienced folks who really understand what it's like at the desk. So when you have coffee chats, you really want to talk about, let's say, oh, I'm really excited about investment banking. I heard that it's really quantitative and really collaborative, and I'm really interested in some of the deals that I've been reading in the Wall Street Journal. Why did you get into investment banking? What excites you? And I remember being in my super days, which is like the interview process, and literally quoting people like, hey, I actually talked to Sam, and Sam talked about how Bank of America really fostered a culture of collaboration. And he spoke about this one deal, and he said this and this and this, and that really excited me. So that, why banking, why the firm? You have to build that as you are doing your coffee chat. So coffee chats kind of do those. It's on the one hand, you're indirectly showing that you're smart and you kind of know what's going on and you're someone worth investing in. On the other hand, you're trying to glean these little tidbits to put that story together. But ultimately, it starts with doing the research to build a generic story, because that's like the gatekeeping story. It's the thing that at least say, hey, this kid, this person has at least done the research and knows what they're talking about. And then once you're there, you can start kind of crafting the more individual story.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I remember on this investment banking trip that I went on, it was clear that some people could like take this overboard, and it was like, in their questions or in their answers, they would like go into this deep analysis of like a recent transaction that the bank had as a way to like flex on their knowledge, and it almost felt like super inauthentic. That's not what you're recommending, but there is a sweet spot of, I have done my homework, I know what separates this bank apart, and I think that can feel really genuine and make them, make it clear that you have done the homework. All right, let's go over to the technical interviews piece. Probably a part that a lot of folks are nervous about. Again, we do have a technical interview session coming up, and we have tons of coaches that specialize in technical interview prep. So definitely encourage you to do that. We'll drop the link in the Slack for those of you that want to do that. But I'm curious, maybe Jacob, how did you think about this? What do you recommend for folks that are just getting started here?
Yeah, I think that there's an interesting dynamic with people preparing for investment banking where they over-index on technical interviews and think that this is the most daunting and difficult part of the process. And I think that is true on some aspect. Like, I studied economics. I didn't know how the three financial statements tied together until I learned it myself. But I think that you have to realize that technical interviews are just check the box. They're never going to hire someone because of the technical interviews. They just want to see that you can get the right answer and have the intellectual horsepower. So with that caveat, I would say that my best forms of technical interview preparation were, one, using some of like the classic investment banking 300 question guide and trying to do my own work to understand basic accounting and finance and what a DCF is, et cetera, et cetera. But once you move beyond that, you realize that none of the investment banks are actually going to ask you those questions. And so you need to go get real firsthand experience with what they're asking. So I would then go and talk to a bunch of Cates or a bunch of people that had just finished their internships or recruiting and say, hey, can we sit down and you mock interview me for 20 minutes and use some of the interview questions that they asked you? And once you start doing that, you realize, oh, there's a whole different caliber of questions, and I need to fine-tune not only my answers, but how I verbally present myself. And so I think both of those things are great ways that you could use Leland coaches if you lack resources in your current school or connections. But yeah, that's a great way to approach technical interviews.
That's great. Cate or David, anything else you'd add on technicals? Cool. Let's talk about just like briefly interview etiquette. Sort of like, I mean, there's some of the basics, but I'd be curious if there's anything that you'd recommend for folks. David, maybe we'll kick this one to you to start, and then we'll go to Cate. Anything you recommend? And I guess not only things that people maybe do wrong, misconceptions, but or kind of like common problems that you see, but also like specific things that you think really set someone apart.
Yeah, so aside from kind of like the basics, like making sure you're dressed well and for the role that you want when you show up to an interview, bringing a notepad with you, having a resume on hand, kind of all that kind of generic preparation. I think energy is really important. Ultimately, while they are asking you technical questions and they're, that's really important. To Jacob's point, a lot of this is about fit. And at the level of which you'll be entering, if you're an analyst, even if you're an associate coming from business school, you're not going to know a ton to execute the job extremely well in the first few months of that job. So what they're really looking for are people who are energetic, who ask really smart questions, who are eager to learn. So some of the etiquette of like expressing that, whether facially, taking notes, having questions prepared on a piece of paper and kind of it's just there on the table. So you're kind of like showing that you came prepared. These type of things are signals to the bankers or the recruiters that this person is taking this extremely seriously. And that they will get better and learn, because that's ultimately the only way you're going to get good at this job is once you have it. So some of that etiquette, I think a lot of it, particularly, for your internships, is about the energy you bring to that conversation. So I feel like, whoa, I think this person like is going to be okay working 80 hours, 100 hours. That's really important. So I just want to highlight that.
Yeah, it's super helpful. Cate, anything that you'd add on this one?
Yeah, just to add on to what David said, I think being personable is really important. You will have different types of interviewers. For example, my Lazard Super Day, the MD that sat down with me was very casual. All he wanted to do was get to know me. He didn't really ask me that many like HR mandated questions. Whereas with Evercore, it was very, very, or at least just the interviewer was very methodical in walking through each question one by one. So learning how to match their vibe and just be kind of a fit within that one interview is really important, I think, for the process. And I think the best way to do that is by doing kind of what Jacob mentioned before, is lots and lots of mock interviews with lots and lots of different people. So you learn how to match different people's interviewing styles.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really important to match that's something that you can't come in with the same playbook for everyone. If someone's in a hurry and wants to get through a lot of questions, you need to tighten up your answers. If someone wants to sit down and hear more about, you and why you're interested, you can, lengthen them a bit. It's a really good advice. Okay, we're coming up on time here. So we're going to do a final tip for this session. Anything that you'd recommend? People are sitting there in their rooms thinking, what do I need to do? We had a question come in, how many coffee chats do I need to be doing? Any other resources? What final tips do you have to help candidates stand out during the recruiting process? Maybe Jacob will go to you, and then Cate, and then David to close us out.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Something worthy of a final tip. I don't know. That's a hard one. Maybe one thing I would just say, and I think this has been harped on a lot, is everyone is trying really hard and is going to put forth a lot of effort and is probably very smart and intelligent. And so when you're differentiating from someone else, it's very much on the margin. And so one like easy personal example I can share is at Qatalyst, they only do technology M&A. So one thing that they're going to screen for very heavily is, hey, do you actually want to do technology? Do you actually like technology? And so what they'll do is they'll say, hey, tell us about a technology company or industry that you're really interested in. And so I think like a smart, hard-working person would be like, oh, I know about like Google or Amazon, and they'll like read about it for 10 minutes and then regurgitate that. And that's like a fine answer. But the way you're going to really have a chance of standing out and differentiating is by doing the extra mile. And so that might be, for me, taking a more off the beaten path, niche like software company that I had some experience with, and then going really deep into it and being able to explain the ecosystem better than probably anyone expected. And I think that really differentiated me when, at the end of the day, I wasn't that different. I did the exact same technicals as other people, and my story probably sounded a lot the same, but I went the extra mile on one question. So I would just think about finding a way to go the extra mile throughout your different processes and trying to differentiate that way.
It's great.
Yeah.
Cate, go for it.
Yeah, on kind of a similar vein, I think having a really well-written skills and interest section on your resume can also help differentiate yourself, and that's something a lot of candidates overlook. I'll get resumes that just say I enjoy like skiing, hiking, cooking, baking, like that's it. But the skills and interest section is a really good way to give your like interviewer, like the interview committee, one kind of defining trait that they'll remember you by. There was one girl who, at least when I was going through my summer process, she did junior rodeo and she had like her goat tying event times in her resume, and everyone called her the goat tying girl, and she was super, super memorable. And so I'd recommend like really tightening up that skills and interest section to make sure that in addition to the rest of your technical and like personal abilities, kind of sets you apart a little bit as well.
It's great. David, bring us home, man.
Yeah, I guess, given where all of you are likely are in the process, it's important to remember that this is like a relationship management game in the early days. And it's really important to cultivate those relationships authentically. So once you meet someone, once you grab their card, once you have coffee, make sure you follow up with a thank you note. Follow up in a couple months to let them know a new update. Maybe you took a new course. You don't want to bombard people, but there is a methodical way to build relationships here. And I think when that is done the right way, people actually want to advocate for you. I remember there was a student, non-target school, kind of poor GPA, master at relationship management. He was like in the bank meeting people every other week. And you just see him in the lobby, like, I saw you're here again. So really make sure that you're cultivating these relationships and that you are showing authentic interest and you're building it authentically. I think people can sense when things feel transactional and it doesn't feel great. So you really want to show interest, not just in the process, but in the person, follow up, make them feel like you're bringing them along on this journey. So when the time comes for them to advocate for you, to push your resume in, when you ask them kind of after the first coffee chat, how can you get your resume in front of recruiting? They actually want to do that for you. And if you're there, that's a lot of the game. And the rest of it is just preparation. So that's really important. And that's the last tip I guess I'd leave you with.
It's great. Thank you guys. Can we just show some love to the panelists? Big thank you. Such a great panel. So many interesting insights. Again, this was a little bit higher level. We're going to go deeper into many of these topics throughout the week. So make sure you register for those sessions. Also, David is an active coach on Leland, so feel free to reach out to him or other coaches on the platform. But big thank you, Jacob, David, and Cate. Really appreciate you taking time out of your Monday to be here with us. As I mentioned, here are some of the upcoming investment banking sessions that are happening, I think all tomorrow. So networking, technicals, and behaviorals. We're going to go deep into all of them, have a great panel, and they're hosted by some great coaches. So thank you, and hope you have a great night. Thanks again, coaches.